Days after the Taliban-led government in Afghanistan banned women in that country from pursuing higher education, the administration has now ordered all local and foreign NGOs to stop women employees from working with them. Prompting global condemnation and sparking protests, the decision has resulted in a massive backlash. Major Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar too have protested this decision. The US and the G7 nations have come forward in support of Afghan women and warned that there will be serious consequences if the Taliban fails to reverse this decision. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said the Taliban are trying to sentence Afghanistan's women to a dark future without any opportunity, and by doing this, the administration will miserably fail in its efforts to improve relations with the rest of the world.
There are going to be costs if this is not reversed, if this is not changed. I'm not going to detail them today, but we will pursue them in coordination with allies and partners. And I can tell you as well that any prospect that the Taliban seeks for improved relations with the world, with the international community, which is something that they want and we know that they need, that is not going to happen if they continue on this course.
Meanwhile, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, on behalf of the Group of Seven Nations, strongly condemned the Taliban's decision and addressed the issue, calling it a crime against humanity.
Und deswegen werden wir hier noch stärker zusammenarbeiten. Das gilt mit Blick auf Beschaffung, das gilt mit Blick auf Lieferung, das gilt mit Blick auf Munition. Wir haben bekanntermaßen als Bundesrepublik Deutschland hochmoderne Iris-T-Systeme und jetzt auch noch mal weitere Geparden zur Verfügung gestellt. Und ich begrüße die Entscheidung unserer amerikanischen Freunde mit Blick auf das Patriot-System. Wir werden jetzt gemeinsam noch mal schauen, was wir zusätzlich weiter tun können.
The United Nations too is standing in solidarity with Afghan women and have said the Taliban has time and again broken its promises. The UN says it's hard to imagine a country developing without women's support.
What it is, it's clearly another broken promise from the Taliban. We have seen since their takeover, and also in the past months, just a lessening of the space for women. Not only in education, but access to public areas, their non-participation in the public debate. It's another very troubling move, and it's difficult to imagine how a country can develop, can deal with all of the challenges that it has without the active participation of women.
The Afghan Education Minister Nida Mohammad Nadeem, in his first comments on this controversy, told the Afghan state broadcaster that several issues had prompted this decision. He blamed it on women's clothing. He said women students did not adhere to appropriate Islamic attire and that women were seen interacting with male students. For more on this, we're now joined by Lynn O'Donnell, who is a journalist. Thanks so much for speaking to WION. Now, there's been just so much condemnation and global outrage over what's happened in Afghanistan. Women's human rights are being repeatedly targeted by the Taliban. What does this really mean for the women of Afghanistan?
To be honest with you, I don't think that anything that the Taliban does to roll back the rights of women in Afghanistan should come as any surprise. Last week there was a lot of pearl clutching about the announced ban on women going to university, but they'd already banned girls from going to secondary school. So the natural corollary to that was girls who don't go to secondary school aren't going to be able to go on to tertiary education. I think that the ban on women working in the charity sector, both international and domestic, is really just the next step. And I think that the step that we'll see after that is women being forced to stay at home, not do any work at all. I mean, you know, it's been coming. The Taliban ruled Afghanistan between 1996 and 2001, and this is exactly what they did. We will open schools to girls when the time is right. And of course, the right time never comes. This is their own interpretation of Sharia law. They've never been held to account, and nobody has ever asked them to explain what their interpretation is. Misogyny is the bottom line.
The question really is, the whole world is condemning the Taliban, but that does not seem to be a deterrent for them in any way. What can the world do to actually put more pressure on the Taliban?
Well, as I mentioned, there haven't really been any consequences for any of the Taliban's excesses since they took control in August 2021. They were allowed to travel, and even though there are United Nations security travel bans on those members of the Taliban who are listed as terrorists, they can still be accepted at the request of one country only, so that they are able to go to Russia, for instance, to Iran, to Doha, to anywhere. Any UN member can make that request, to China. So really there aren't any reasons for the Taliban not to be acting the way they are. Now, you ask what can be done. Well, for a start, I think the United States could stop sending in tens of millions of dollars in cash, as it does every week by air. That's then handed over to the United Nations, which then hands it over to local charity groups, which are sanctioned by the Taliban, ostensibly for humanitarian relief. It doesn't get to the people who need it. People I know who work in the local charity sector in Afghanistan tell me if 50% of what is meant to go to people who are hungry and poor and in desperate circumstances actually made it to those in need, that would be a miracle. There has to be some level of accountability for that money, and at the moment there is not. I think what the Taliban are doing is pretending to the United States that they are interested in counter-terrorism cooperation, as the State Department in Washington calls it. And in that way, they are managing to pretend that they are part of an overall effort against terrorism. But the fact is that the Taliban are also hosting dozens of terrorist organizations in Afghanistan as a thank you for them fighting alongside them for 20 years until last August. Afghanistan has become, with the sponsorship of the Western community led by the United Nations and the United States, the world's center for terrorism.
Thanks very much for speaking to WION.